On Father's Day morning, I got a package with "For Dad" printed on it. My heart dipped with simple joy the first time after days of silence my daughter remembered me. I smiled at my wife. Maybe Tessa isn't mad anymore. But my wife's smile vanished as soon as she looked closely at the box. "Don't open it. Can't you see?" I bent down. Tiny pinholes ran around the edge of the lid, and from inside came a faint hiss, cold enough to prickle my spine. I froze. The joy from a moment ago collapsed into confusion. A week ago, Tessa had screamed in my face that I was choosing money over family. Now this box with no sender, arriving exactly on Father's Day, felt like her answer. I didn't open it. I just picked up the phone, dialed 911, and wondered if the person who once called me Dad had just sent me the worst Father's Day wish of my life. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. My name is Clarence Porter, 66, a retired electrical engineer from a utility company in Ohio. All my life I worked, saved, and took care of family, my gentle wife, Marion, and our only daughter, Tessa, the light of my life for 30 years. After retiring, I thought the rest of my life would be peaceful. Tend the yard, read the paper, take Marion fishing at the lake now and then. But life, as I learned too late, rarely goes the way we want. When money wedges itself into family, even the most sacred bond can crack. And that day, on what seemed like an ordinary Father's Day morning, I realized the love between me and my daughter had turned into something cold and unfamiliar. I stood rooted in the living room. Morning light still poured through the window, shining on the green rug Marion had just cleaned yesterday, but the room felt a few degrees colder. The package sat in the center of the oak coffee table, so ordinary it was scary. That harmless look made me more uneasy than anything. "Clarence, could it be the wrong address?" Marion asked, voice trembling. I looked at the neat "For Dad" on the label and the handwriting I knew too well. "No," I said quietly. "I'm sure it's from her." We hadn't spoken in 6 days since Tessa and Derek stormed out after the argument. It wasn't the first time, but this time was different. The way she looked at me that day, empty, so cold it felt like I'd lost someone forever. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to the box. The sound inside was soft but clear. Scrape, hiss, scrape, like something moving. Marion backed up a few steps, arms wrapped tight across her chest. "Don't touch it," she almost whispered, her voice wound tight like a string. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and kept it short. "I've received a suspicious package. There are strange sounds inside and air holes." The dispatcher's calm voice told me to keep my distance, don't touch it, and wait for officers to arrive within 10 minutes. "Please stay inside, keep the windows closed, and if possible, move out of the room where the package is." I looked around. The living room once where we'd all gather now held only the tick of a clock and the heavy breathing of 2 old people. I nodded and guided Marion behind the couch. "Stay here. Keep your distance," I said softly. "What do you think?" "It is?" she asked. I didn't answer. There were 100 possibilities, but one thought kept circling my head. Tessa knew our routines. She knew that on Sunday mornings I'd be home, reading the paper right here. She knew I would never throw away a gift from my daughter. I set the phone on the table, opened the home security app, and started continuous recording. 3 tiny cameras in the room blinked on. I wanted evidence just in case anything happened. "What are you doing?" Marion asked, low. "I want to make sure if someone sent this, we'll know who." We waited. Each second stretched like a minute. I heard my heartbeat, the wind outside, and then, again, that faint hiss from the box. Marion squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles went white. Suddenly I remembered an evening last year Tessa dropped by after 3 months gone. She brought a box of pastries, smiled like there'd never been distance. But behind that smile, I saw a flash in her eyes. Calculation. And sure enough, she needed money to cover a short-term debt of Derek's. I helped. Again. Since then, every visit, every message revolved around money. When I said no, she switched tones, told me I wasn't the loving father I used to be. I thought things could be fixed. Until last week, when the fight exploded and she shouted a line I'll never forget, "You choose money over me." Now, that box seemed to be answering me. Outside, a faint siren grew closer. I exhaled, but didn't relax. While waiting, I checked the front door and windows, then pulled the curtains to dim the box. "They'll be here soon," I said. Marion only nodded, staring at the box like it might spring open. I took an old blanket and draped it over the table to cover the box, part fear, part not wanting to look at it anymore. The air felt thick. I realized I was gripping Marion's hand, the hands of two old people trembling together. The doorbell rang. I jumped, heart in my throat. Through frosted glass, red and blue lights flickered against the wall. I walked over and peered through the crack. A police officer stood there, hand on his radio, alert eyes. I opened it a sliver. "Are you Mr. Clarence Porter?" he asked. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The package, it's still where it was. Please step back. We'll take a look." I moved back and pulled Marion with me. As they moved into the living room, I glanced at my phone screen. The cameras were rolling. The gift box sat under dim light, small, but menacing. I swallowed, feeling both hollow and heavy. The officers were talking on the radio, but I barely heard. Only one question kept hammering in my head. How does a father's love turn into fear like this? And in that moment, I knew. Everything was about to change for good. Just 6 days before the box showed up, my kitchen had been just as quiet until my daughter's voice tore the air. "I need the money now, not after you die." A porcelain cup crashed to the floor and shattered. Coffee splattered across the Persian rug Marion loved. I stood frozen, fingers still stained with ink from the will I was reviewing. That sentence didn't just stun me, it cut straight between father and daughter. Tessa wasn't the little kid who used to wrap her arms around my neck at the park. She stood there with cold eyes, bright red lipstick, voice hoarse with rage. "You're sitting on a pile of money while we struggle every month." I clenched the stack of papers. "Tessa, that's my retirement plan. And you've burned through 3 emergency bailouts in 3 years. Derek's gambling, your credit cards, even your car insurance, I paid it all." Derek lounged back on the leather sofa, arms crossed, smirking like he was watching cheap theater. "Come on, old man. What's wrong with sharing the fun while you're still alive? Your daughter's just trying to keep the family afloat." He dragged out, "Old man," like a thorn. I turned and stared him down. "You're right," I shared. "For 3 years, every time you called, I helped. I paid off cards, fixed cars, covered rent, even the kids' tuition. And it's still not enough?" Tessa slammed her palm on the table, tears running, not remorse, just anger at being refused. "You don't get it. I'm trying to keep our family from collapsing. Derek lost his job. I can't do everything. You could help, but you won't." I took a breath, kept my tone even. "Sweetheart, helping once is love. Helping forever is raising you wrong. You and Derek have to own your choices. No one else." The room got so heavy I could hear the clock tick. Marion stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel, eyes pleading at me. "Clarence, please, calm down." I stayed calm, but my chest felt like stone. "I am calm, Marion, but this is the last time." Tessa laughed dry, a harsh, brittle sound. "Calm? You call it calm to let your own daughter drown in debt? While you live easy in this house, eating mom's cooking, never worrying about money a day in your life?" I pointed at the wallet on the table. "Easy comes from working 43 years straight. I worked nights, missed your birthdays, so you could have a new prom dress, so you could go to college without loans. Everything you have came from those years. 43 years? Tessa scoffed, voice warped. And you think that's enough to keep my love? Dignity, pride, you go on and on. I need money, not honor. I didn't answer. The family photo on the mantel fell wind or a hand, I didn't know. The silver frame lay face down, reflecting pale yellow light. I stared at it a long time, like seeing myself in a warped mirror of the past. Derek stood, stepped closer, voice low and dripping with contempt. You know what, Will? I think you enjoy this. Holding the money, watching people beg. Makes you feel powerful, doesn't it? I heard Marion suck in a sharp breath, but I just looked him in the eye. Get out of my house. What? I said, get out. You and my daughter. Right now. Tessa froze. You can't do that to me. I already did. For a beat. The whole room locked in place. No sound, just heavy breathing and the burnt coffee smell in the rug. Tessa whipped around, tears spilling, but her voice was steel. You'll regret this. One day, when you're sick, when you're alone, when no one's there, you'll remember today. You'll know what it feels like to be abandoned. I said nothing. I opened the door. Evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of lilacs, the smell Tessa loved as a child. She stood there a second, then yanked her purse and strode out. Derek followed, turning to throw one last look full of challenge. You'll be calling us soon, Will. Trust me. The door slammed so hard the frame shook. Marion moved in and knelt to blot the coffee. I bent down to help, but she brushed my hand away. Let me. Her voice was raw. I never thought she'd say that. I sat on the chair, will papers crumpled in my hand. She doesn't see a parent's love as precious anymore. To her, it's just numbers. Marion was quiet, tears dropping onto the rug. I knew she was hurting, but I also knew she understood. We'd had this talk 100 times about how Tessa and Derek lived, about all the times we pulled them out of debt, how every time we helped, they took another step. I looked around. The frame still face down, shards of cup reflecting the light like sliced-up memories. I picked up the frame and set it upright, but our faces in the photo felt blurred now. Do you think she'll come back and apologize? Marion asked softly. I answered, my throat tight. Not soon. She's learning how to punish us. She looked at me, said nothing. Only the soft sound of tissues wiping the last coffee stains. The house sank into silence. Not peace, just the hush after a storm. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. A thought flashed, clear as a line on paper. Maybe love needs limits. Without them, it becomes a chain. The door closed behind me, leaving the smell of burnt coffee and a heaviness so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't know that 6 days later, the boundary I set that night would lead my daughter to choose such a cruel way to strike back. After that tense evening, our house fell into a strange quiet. 6 days went by, no texts, no calls, no notifications. To others that might be normal. But to me, who'd lived 3 years in a cycle of crisis after crisis, that Tessa created this silence was a sign that something was brewing. Tessa had a pattern. After a blow-up, she'd go silent for 2 days, then on day 3, send a half apology like, Dad, I went too far, but I really need a little help. Apologies always came with a request, and I, playing dad and bankroll, rarely stayed firm enough to say no. But this time was different. 6 days, not a word. Saturday morning, Marion made our coffee like always. She tried small talk. The maple in the yard was turning early. The garage door needed grease. Mr. Henderson next door bought a new car. I listened, but my mind drifted. Inside, I felt like I was standing before a storm whose wind was still hiding far off. By Sunday, the sun was bright, the kind of early summer American sunshine I've always loved. I sat on the porch with the Sunday paper open, sparrows chirping, Everything seemed calm, so calm it felt fake. Around close to 11, a brown UPS truck slowed in front of the house. I didn't pay attention at first, thinking they had the wrong address. Then the driver got out with a medium square box and headed straight toward me. "Mr. Clarence Porter?" he asked. "Yes, special Sunday delivery, signature required." I frowned a little. Sunday service isn't cheap, costs extra. I signed, took the box, and couldn't help smiling when I saw the print in the corner. "For Dad." Marion peeked from the kitchen, dish towel in hand. "From Tessa?" "I think so," I said, a flicker of relief passing through me. Maybe she was trying to make peace in her own way. I set the box on the coffee table, careful in case it was fragile. "Feels light," I said. "Almost empty." Marion came closer, squinting at the box. "Strange. No return address?" I checked again. No sender, no store sticker, just a generic label and that handwritten "For Dad" in black ink. She touched the edge and pulled back. "Do you see it? Something feels off." I was about to joke. "We're just old and paranoid." But she tilted her head, eyes widening. "Wait. Clarence, look here." I bent down. Tiny, evenly spaced holes dotted the corner. "Looks like air holes," she whispered. I stiffened. "Breathing holes?" "Yeah. Listen." I leaned in. For a few seconds, nothing but the clock. Then a very soft hiss, air leaking through a slit, and silence. I looked up at Marion. She just shook her head, hands trembling. The air thickened. The box wasn't a gift anymore, it felt like a living thing lying in wait. I stepped back, half doubting, half believing. The unease kept rising. She put a hand to her chest, voice rough. "Clarence, do you think someone wants to hurt us?" I stayed quiet. I didn't want to say it, but that thought had been there since the first hiss. I turned to the door and locked it. Then I moved Marion behind the couch, about 6 feet from the table. "Don't come closer," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm calling the police." I lifted the phone. My fingers shook a little as I dialed 911. While it rang, I glanced at the box. It lay still, like it had never made a sound. That stillness scared me more. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke slowly, trying to stay calm. "I've got a package with no sender, signs of a live animal inside. There's hissing, air holes, and a faint smell. Please send a unit." She asked a few more details, then ended with, "Please keep your distance and don't move the package. Officers will arrive within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I set the phone down, feeling each second drag like an hour. Marion tried a small, reassuring smile, but her lips shook. I held her hand. "Do you remember when Tessa was little?" I said softly. "She caught a caterpillar and put it in a box as a birthday gift for me." Marion nodded, eyes shining. "She was 6, and she cried when the caterpillar died." I looked at the box, my chest tightening. "She's grown up now, but it seems she forgot how to care." She squeezed my hand. "Do you think she really sent it?" "I don't know," I said, voice rough. "But the timing is too perfect to be random." We stood there, saying nothing, just the ceiling fan and the heavy space between us. Then the sound returned, hiss, scrape, hiss, clearer, longer. Marion jerked back, bumped the table, nearly fell. I caught her. "It's okay. Stay here." I scanned the room, mapping exits. Back door to the yard, about 12 feet from the table. Kitchen leads to the garage. In my head flashed all the weak moments, rushed checks, just borrowing, me telling myself she's just a little short. I thought I was saving the family. Maybe I'd been spoiling her until love became a tool. Now I was paying for it. Marion whispered. "If it's really Tessa." "I don't want to think that," I cut in. "But I'm afraid I already know." I stared at the box again. No movement. Quiet, like it had never made a sound. A siren sounded at the end of the street, growing louder. I let out a long breath, feeling relief mixed with shame that, deep down, I was suspecting my own daughter. But how could I not, when every sign pointed one way? I turned to Marion. "When they get here, stay behind me. Don't leave this spot." She nodded, voice shaking. "Do you think they'll believe us?" "I don't know. But this time, I'm letting the law handle it." Between the fear, another feeling slipped in: tiredness. I was tired of carrying every responsibility, tired of explaining away other people's mistakes. And I realized sometimes love doesn't save anyone, it just drags you down with them. Tires crunched on the gravel out front. I stood, looked through the window. 2 officers approached, moving with purpose, red and blue still flashing. I glanced at Marion and saw fear and relief at the same time. She murmured, "Maybe. The storm is really here, Clarence." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "Yeah," I said quietly. "But this time, we won't run. We'll let them see this isn't just a prank." And as the doorbell rang, I knew the 6 days of silence had only been the opening to a carefully planned storm. A firm, decisive knock sounded. I cracked the door, and a police officer stood there, tall, solid, serious without being scary. The name tag on his chest read, "Grant Ruiz." "Hello, Mr. Porter," he said in a clear, low voice. "We got a report about a suspicious package." "That's right," I said, stepping back to let him in. "It's on the living room table. There are breathing holes and sounds inside." Officer Ruiz stepped in, eyes scanning the space with the focus of someone who's handled emergencies. He stopped at the table, bent down, and examined the box under the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Have you or your wife touched it?" he asked. "I only lifted it once when the delivery guy handed it to me," I said. "I haven't opened it, shaken it, or done anything else." "Good," he nodded. "Please keep a safe distance. There could be a live animal inside." Marion gripped my hand. I could feel how cold her fingertips were. We both stepped back and stood by the kitchen exit, a little over 6 feet from the table. Officer Ruiz tilted his head, listening closely. "Do you hear anything?" I strained my ears, but the room was dead quiet. "It's still now. A minute ago there was a faint hiss, like breathing." He frowned, leaned in closer, and pointed at the tiny holes around the lid. "These holes aren't from impact. Someone punched them on purpose." His words gave me a chill. He stepped back and reached for his radio. "I'm calling animal control. They have the right gear for this. If I'm not mistaken." He paused and glanced at me. "There's a good chance it's a snake." Marion exhaled, sharply, almost a gasp. "A snake?" "We're not certain, ma'am," he said, reassuring. "But this is just to be safe. People do get sent snakes as a nasty prank, especially around holidays." I tried to smile, but my lips were dry. "A prank," I repeated, as if to convince myself. "It's probably just a prank." "Do you have anyone in mind who might have sent it?" Officer Ruiz asked, voice gentle but sharp. "Anyone with a grievance, or who's made threats?" I glanced at Marion, then shook my head. "No, no one. It could be a mix-up." The delivery guy didn't say much. He looked at me a beat longer, the look of someone used to knowing when a person is holding something back, but he didn't push. He just nodded and called for backup over the radio. While we waited for animal control, I watched him circle the box, carefully taking notes and occasionally crouching to snap photos. I stood still, my heart thudding as if any step he took might wake whatever was inside. "Mr. Porter," he said after a few minutes, "we often see cases like this tied to exotic animal sales. Sometimes someone orders online and the package gets misdelivered. Have you used a credit card to buy anything like that?" I shook my head. "I haven't, but—" The sentence died in my throat. A memory flashed, sharp as a blade. 3 weeks ago, while checking my account, I saw a strange charge. Reptile World, $128.50. I almost called the bank to dispute it, then remembered. Tessa had an authorized card for emergencies. When I asked, she texted back, "Don't worry, Dad. I just borrowed it for something small. I'll pay it back." I let it go. I never wanted to believe my daughter could be mixed up in something shady. But now, staring at the box on the table, all the pieces snapped into place. My throat went dry. I swallowed, but said nothing. Officer Ruiz watched me, as if he'd noticed the change in my eyes. "Did something just occur to you?" I quickly shook my head. "No, just remembered a time when a package got delivered to the wrong house." He didn't press, but his look said he wasn't fully convinced. He pulled out his phone, jotted a quick note, then went back to the radio. I turned to Marion. She was perched on the edge of the chair, hands clenched. "Do you think it was her?" she asked, voice hoarse and shaking. I didn't answer right away. "I don't want to believe it, Marion, but the timing is too perfect." She closed her eyes and shook her head slightly, tears slipping out without a sound. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to shout, to tell Officer Ruiz I knew who sent this, but another part, the father part, still wanted to believe my daughter hadn't sunk that low. The radio crackled. "Unit 12. Animal Control will arrive in 10 minutes. "Copy," Officer Ruiz said, then turned back to us. "They're on the way. Please stay where you are." I nodded and stepped farther back. Each step felt heavier. Noon light poured through the window onto the box, turning it into a pale block. Looking at it, I felt like I was seeing the first crack in a roof I once thought was solid. I remembered the evening Tessa borrowed the card, her sweet voice on the phone. "Dad, just this once." I believed her, like all the times before. Believed because I felt I owed her some of her childhood back. Believed because I was afraid if I said no, she'd hate me forever. Now, thinking about that $128.50, I couldn't justify it anymore. Marion asked quietly, "If it really was her, what will you do?" I answered slowly, "I don't know yet, but I do know one thing. I won't hide anything from the police this time." We waited a little longer and then heard another engine outside. A white animal control truck stopped at the curb. The side had a paw print logo and the words County Wildlife Response Unit. Two people in protective gear stepped out carrying a clear plastic bin and long hooked tools. They spoke briefly with Officer Ruiz and then came inside. "Hello," one of them said, calm, like this was routine. "We'll handle this gently. Please keep your distance." I pointed to the table. "It's right there." The tech knelt and tapped the box lightly with the hook. A soft scrape sounded, and immediately a clear hiss followed. Marion let out a small cry. Goosebumps rose on my arms. "It's a snake," the tech said quickly, steady as ever. "Looks like a corn snake. Non-venomous." He cracked the lid, maneuvered the hook, and within a few minutes the animal was in the clear bin, secure. Officer Ruiz nodded. "Good work. Thank you." As they carried the snake out, I stood frozen. It had taken only 10 minutes, but it felt like a whole day. The room was bare now. Only a few disinfectant droplets and faint scratches marked where the box had been. Marion came to my side and took my hand. Her hand was still cold. "It's over," she whispered. I stared at the empty spot on the table where the snake had been. In my mind, Tessa as a little girl appeared, brown curls, giggling when I taught her to fish, sprinting across the yard with a kitten in her arms. I couldn't reconcile that child with a grown woman who could send a snake to her father. "Do you see?" I murmured. "How fast everything changed. 6 days ago, our daughter stood in this kitchen talking to us. Today she might be the reason police came to our house." Marion didn't answer. She just rested her head on my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, my eyes fixed on the space between the table and the chair, the place where the gift box had sat. In the soft midday light, I realized something I'd never imagined. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from the hands you once held. And when the animal control truck pulled away, leaving, The yard quiet. I was still standing there, staring at that spot, like it was an invisible cut dividing my family's past from its present. The animal control tech introduced himself as Mike Halper, a calm-looking technician, dark brown eyes, unhurried voice, and a way of handling his tools like this was just another day at work. He opened the box by the book. Gloves on, a clear shield over the top, and a metal tong slipped gently inside. Seconds later came a soft scrape, a hiss. Through the gap, a slick band of reddish-orange and white patterned scales slid into view. A corn snake, about 3 feet long, coiling around the tong. Marion gasped and pressed into my shoulder. I could feel her whole body shaking, even though I knew this species wasn't venomous. What scared me wasn't the creature, it was the sender's intent. Mike eased the snake into the hard plastic carrier. He locked the lid, clicked the safety clasp, and gave me a polite smile. Not venomous, Mr. Porter. Corn snake. Popular as a pet, very docile. This one's young, around 9 months. Whoever sent it knew what they were choosing. I just looked at him, silent. He continued, jotting notes on a clipboard. It's well cared for. Someone spent time and money on it, not an amateur. And the packing's professional, even air holes, insulating liner inside sealed to live animal guidelines. Whoever did this knows the procedure. Each word felt like a cold blade. My throat tightened. Someone this knowledgeable wouldn't do it just for fun. This took time, planning, intent. Officer Ruiz stood nearby, writing in his notebook. He glanced at me, voice lower. Mr. Porter, I need to ask again, do you want us to open a case to track the sender? With your signature, we can work with the carrier to trace the address and payment. I heard every word, but my head felt empty. Part of me wanted to nod right away, find the truth, let justice speak. But another part, the father clung to a thin hope this was a misunderstanding. I hesitated, then said quietly, "It might just be a dumb prank, officer. I don't think an investigation is necessary." Ruiz looked at me for a long moment, half sympathy, half disappointment. He'd seen people like me, parents who kept quiet because their hearts were tied by blood. He only nodded, said nothing more, and wrote, "Declined to file report" on the form. Mike latched the carrier tight. "I'll take it to the county reptile rescue," he said. "Beautiful animal. Someone paid a decent amount for it." He paused, gave me a kind look. "If you want, I can send the species and origin report to the police." "I don't think that's necessary," I answered, my voice rough. Mike nodded, and he and Officer Ruiz started clearing the scene. They sprayed disinfectant around the table, wiped every spot, sealed the cardboard box with red evidence tape, and marked it, "Evidence do not touch." In a few minutes, my room looked like a mini crime scene, neat, precise, spotless. But what couldn't be wiped away was the feeling of being violated. This room had always been warm, the place where Marion and I watched the news each night, where Tessa used to tuck her legs under her on the sofa to watch cartoons. Now it felt strangely cold, like someone had stripped the last layer of safety from our home. Mike closed his log and said goodbye. Ruiz stayed a bit longer to sign off, then headed to the door too. "If you change your mind, call me," he said, handing me a card. "We handle cases like this every week, but it's rare to see someone choose silence." I nodded and took the card. "Thank you, Officer Ruiz." When the door shut, the empty space in the house seemed to widen. The sound of engines pulling away left a silence that felt almost scary. Marion stood by the table, staring at the damp spots left on the wood. Noon light slanted through the window, and the uneven water specks, reflected in warped shapes, like the trace of a storm that had just passed. She murmured, voice breaking, "The room looks clean, but I still smell something. Fear." I stepped close and put a hand on her shoulder. "It'll pass." "Do you really think so?" I stayed quiet. I knew I was lying. Marion turned away, trying to steady herself. You should rest. I'll finish cleaning. I nodded, but instead of going to our room, I sat at the desk. My computer was already on the blue glow of the idle screen reflecting my face in shadow. I moved the mouse and logged into my bank. The familiar lists appeared. Withdrawals, transfers, payments. I'd looked at this 100 times, but this time every line tightened my chest. I started reviewing every authorized card Tessa had used, the small routine purchases, groceries, big box stores, online shopping. And there it was again, Reptile World, bolded at $128.50. I clicked for details. Posting date, 3 weeks ago. Login IP address. The city where Tessa lives. Card used. Authorized username on card, Tessa Porter. I leaned back, feeling my hands tremble. Suspicion turned into proof. No more guesses, no more coincidences. The person who sent that snake was my daughter. I opened another window to check recurring transfers. Still there, $600 a month to Tessa's account for living expenses. I'd promised to stop, but out of pity I kept it going. And now, that very money might have bought today's gift. Marion came back and set a hand on my shoulder. You're not resting. I pointed at the screen. Look. She bent down, then froze. Oh my God, Tessa? I nodded, saying nothing. She sat beside me, hands shaking. What are you going to do? I stared at the final line, at authorized user Tessa Porter. I'm not calling the police, I said, voice low but steady. Not because I'm afraid of gossip, because if I do, there'll be nothing left to save, so you're going to. I'm cutting every link. Tonight. Marion nodded slowly, eyes wet. She knew, like I did, this wasn't just about money. This was a boundary between pity and self-destruction. I clicked Manage Users. A cool blue confirmation window popped up. I hovered over Remove. One click, and it felt like cutting through 30 years of love. Maybe only parents know that feeling. If you were me, could you do the same? Please share your thoughts below. I truly want to know if there's another way. In that moment, I saw Tessa at 10, grinning in a little floral dress, running around the kitchen yelling, "Daddy, I want to be like Mom." That bright, innocent look cut like a clean blade, reminding me how blindly I'd loved her. Marion squeezed my hand. You're doing this for both of you. For her too. I nodded and clicked. The screen flashed. User removed successfully. I sat still for a while, hearing only my heartbeat and the wind outside the window. In the pale afternoon light, the room looked calm again. But inside me, the storm hadn't passed. Beside the table, the disinfectant ring had dried, leaving a faint circular haze on the wood like a scar from that morning. I stared at it for a long time and understood. From this moment on, every action I take must have a boundary. Love can't be an excuse anymore, and silence has reached its expiration date. That night, I couldn't sleep. Street light leaked through the curtains, breaking into jagged strips across the ceiling. Marion lay still, breathing evenly beside me, but I knew she only had her eyes closed. No one settles after a day like that. I got up, put on a robe, and went to my office. The computer screen still glowed, reminding me things weren't finished. The room was quiet except for the slow tick of the clock, each tick pressing on a decision I was about to make. I reopened the account, management page. Under authorized users, Tessa Porter's name was gone, but there was more. So many financial threads I had tied, one by one over the years, out of love and fear. First line, automatic transfers. $600 a month, set up 3 years ago, with the simple note, support fund. It was supposed to help Tessa get through a rough patch, but that rough patch never ended. Looking at that number felt like facing myself in a mirror, a father always ready to rescue his child from every consequence, only to create an overgrown child who never had to grow up. I took a deep breath and hovered over cancel recurring payment. The confirmation popped up. Are you sure you want to stop this automatic transfer? I paused a few seconds. In my head I heard Tessa as a little girl. Daddy, if I mess up, will you forgive me? I remember patting her head and saying, I always will. Maybe that's when I planted the seed of unconditional forgiveness. I clicked, yes. The screen blinked, then canceled appeared. My heart clenched not from regret but from the sadness of a father cutting the last cord to his child. I opened linked accounts. There they were, small payments everywhere. Tessa's car insurance, her phone bill, even the gym membership she said was vital for mental health. All drafted from my account. I canceled them one by one. Each click was another cut. Once, twice, 3 times. I stopped counting. Then I opened security settings. I changed the PIN, the old one tied to Tessa's birthday, into my and Marion's wedding date. I added 2-factor authentication. Every login would now send a code to my phone. No more sneaking in. When I finished, I took screenshots and saved everything. I created a folder named Financial Porter, filled it with every image, change, and piece of evidence. I locked it with a password. Nothing was outside my control anymore. In the stillness, I stared at the folders and felt empty. 10 years ago, I used to save my daughter's photos in a folder called Memories. Now her name lived in a cold finance file. A father can lock down everything he once opened out of love with a single set of commands. That truth hurt and freed me at the same time. I stepped away and leaned on the bookcase. The desk lamp lit up old family photos. Tessa, at 16 on graduation day. Me beside her with a wide smile, my hand on her shoulder like I was afraid of losing something. I realized I'd always feared losing my child more than losing myself. Because of that fear, I let her cross every line until the boundary between love and enabling disappeared. Outside, wind moved softly through the maples, stirring the curtains. I heard Marion's quiet steps on the wood floor. You're still up? I turned and gave a faint smile. I had a few things to finish. She came closer, glanced at the screen, and laid a hand on my shoulder. You did it, didn't you? I nodded. All done. Cut every extra card, ended the transfers, changed the PIN, added security. Nothing's linked anymore. Marion was quiet. Her hand stayed on my shoulder, light as a shared burden. Do you feel lighter? I thought a moment. I do, but it's like taking off an old anchor. The boat is lighter, but the water's still deep, and I don't know where I'll drift. She gave a sad smile. Either way, you finally did what needed to be done. I sat back down, opened my notes, and wrote the last lines. June 17th. Removed all authorized cards. Stopped recurring transfers. Changed bank PIN and passwords. Enabled 2-factor authentication. Saved a separate financial record with its own password. Looking at those lines, I noticed my hand tremble. 30 years, so many checks written, so many rescues, and in the end, it all closed with a few short lines. Marion poured me a hot cup of tea and set it on the table. Drink this, then go rest. You've done your part. I nodded and took a sip. The tea was weak but warm. In that moment, I felt a bit of my chest lift, as if someone had just removed a weight that had sat there for years. But at the same time, another pain crept in, the pain of knowing that, to save myself, I had to give up a piece of someone who used to be my everything. I turned to Marion. She was still standing there, eyes gentle but tired. You know, I said quietly, maybe I was never a perfect dad. I only knew how to work, earn money, and then use money to make up for lost time. But it turns out the way I loved taught her the wrong thing, that money can fix every mistake. Marion shook her head gently. No, Clarence, you just did what you thought was right, but sometimes right isn't enough. I was silent. She was right. Some mistakes aren't intentional, yet their consequences come all the same, gentle as rain into a crack. Over time, the wall rots. On the screen, a final confirmation appeared. Your account changes have been successfully updated. I read the line once more, then shut the computer off. Stepping out of the room, I looked around the quiet house, the photos on the walls, the traces of a once happy family. Everything was still there, but I knew an invisible gap was beginning to form. Before going to bed, I paused on the landing and looked out the window. Moonlight washed the porch, silent, like a witness as an old chapter closed. Tomorrow, I whispered, things will start differently. Because starting tomorrow, Tessa will know the source of indulgence has run dry. And for the first time in her life, she'll have to face consequences, something I, out of love, had shielded her from for 30 years. The next morning, sunlight had just filtered through the curtains when the phone rang. I hadn't even had a first sip of coffee. The screen showed a familiar name, Tessa. I sat there a moment, feeling a mix of calm and a dull ache. I knew this call would come. I just didn't expect it so soon. I answered. What did you do? My daughter's voice came through sharp. Each word clipped. My card won't go through. My account's locked. What are you doing? No greeting, no breath to quiet the anger, just the outrage of someone who's lost an entitlement. I set my coffee down and spoke evenly. Before we talk about the card, I want to ask you something. Do you know anything about the box that arrived yesterday? Silence on the other end for a beat. Then she answered, trying to sound casual. What box? The Father's Day box, I said slowly. It had breathing holes. There was a hiss inside. Still no reply. I could hear her breathing, quick, trying to find the right lie. After a few seconds, Tessa blurted something that stunned me. Oh, come on, Dad, you're overreacting. It was just a prank to wake you up. Who'd think a 60-something old man would be scared of a toy snake? I closed my eyes. She kept talking, quick and off-topic, trying to distract. I only meant to tease you so you'd stop being so grumpy. Maybe the shipper messed up and swapped it with a real order. I cut her off, soft but firm. A live snake is not a joke, Tessa. And whoever spent money to buy it didn't send it by mistake. Silence fell. I thought I could hear my own heartbeat in that quiet. Then, as usual when cornered, Tessa switched to attack. So you're accusing me? You think your daughter would do something like that, after everything I've been through? Been through? I echoed, still calm. All I see is you living off other people's money. That set her off. Fine. If you want war, we'll have war. From now on, don't expect to see Emma and Cole again. They won't know grandparents who are stingy and cruel like this. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. That was the old lever, her go-to move whenever she needed to soften me. I had feared it for years. But this morning that fear didn't work. Tessa, I said slowly, enunciating each word. Those threats stopped having power yesterday. A few seconds of silence. I could hear heavy breathing, then fake sobs. Her voice softened, wet and full of tears. Dad, I'm struggling. I lost my job. Peter's not doing well either. Rent, Emma's school, everything's on me. Do you think I asked for this? I have no choice. For the first time in months, her voice sounded real, or maybe I just wanted it to be real. But my heart had no room left for pity. Tessa, I said, I know what hardship is, but that's your responsibility, not mine. I've helped you more than half my life, and every time you promise to change, things get worse. Not anymore. Her sobs stopped, then changed into a cold, sharp tone. I get it. You want to cut me off. You'll regret this. One day, when you're old, sick, and need someone to care for you, you'll remember today. Don't call me. I exhaled, tired but relieved. I don't need care that comes with contempt, Tessa. I want you to grow up. That may not be in your plan. I heard something hit hard, probably the phone thrown down. Then her voice barked, I don't want to hear this. If you want to live alone, go ahead. The line went dead. The screen showed, call ended. I set the phone down and sat still. Sunlight had poured across the floor, lighting the half-full coffee cup now cold. Watching the steam fade felt like an era closing. Marion came out of the kitchen with a dish towel. "Was it her?" she asked. I nodded. "A fight?" she asked. "No," I said. "This time there's nothing left to fight about." She sat across from me in silence. We both looked out the window, trees stirring in the breeze, a calm that contradicted the turmoil inside me. I told her briefly about the call. Marion listened, face sad but not surprised. "You knew," she said softly. "Someone like her won't stop at words. Sooner or later she'd come." I nodded. I knew. And this time, I won't let her turn everything into a tragedy. She looked at me for a long time, then gave a small nod. I knew Marion still held a sliver of hope that our daughter would see her mistake, but I no longer had the strength to hope with her. I stood and went to the desk, opened my notebook, and wrote, "If confrontation happens, stay calm, no arguing, no giving in, sign nothing. Everything must be documented." Those lines felt like pins on wood. I put down the pen and looked at the family photo on the wall, the Christmas photo from years back when Tessa was 16, beaming between the two of us. I remembered the light from the tree on her face, and the simple pride of thinking my child would have a better future. Now I no longer hoped for her to be better than me, I only hoped she wouldn't hurt anyone, including herself. Outside, the mail truck passed by in steady rhythm. I sat quietly, hand on the notebook. Everything was clear now. This wasn't just a fight between a father and his daughter. It was a clash between reason and a 30-year habit of indulgence. I closed the notebook and told myself, today is the last day I'll be soft. Then I stood and walked to the window, looking down the street, certain that soon a familiar silver car would pull up and Tessa would step out, carrying the anger of someone who's lost privilege. I clenched my hand. This time, I was ready. The next morning, the sky was astonishingly clear. Dew shone on the grass and sunlight streamed through the living room windows. I sat at the breakfast table with the paper open but hadn't read a line. Marion stood at the sink, the steady sound of running water marking the ordinary rhythm of morning. But we both knew today wouldn't be ordinary. Around 9 a.m., an engine sound I knew well rolled down the street. The silver car Tessa and Derek's was back. I didn't need to look to know. The tires scraped the gravel, hurried and raw. Marion turned, a flicker of worry on her face. I nodded slightly and stood. "Stay calm, let me handle it." The doorbell rang, frantic and harsh, followed by heavy pounding on the wood that made the whole house tremble. "Dad, open the door!" Tessa screamed, her voice raw. "Are you hiding in there?" Derek growled behind her. "We know you're home. Don't think locking the door ends it." I walked out onto the porch and unlatched the door but didn't open it wide. I left it ajar enough to see them. Both looked disheveled, faces flushed. "Dad!" Tessa shouted. "Do you know what you've done? You've ruined us. Rent, insurance, cards blocked, you've destroyed us." I kept my voice calm. "No, Tessa. I stopped funding the lifestyle you chose." "Lifestyle? What are you talking about?" she yelled, pointing as if to pierce me. "You're our father, not a stranger. How can you cut everything off? You choose money over family?" I heard those words, "choose money over family," the exact line she used to weaponize against me. But this morning it didn't land. I looked her straight in the eye. "You're wrong. You chose money. You treat love like currency, and you barter with it. Worse, you use your children as leverage against your parents." Tessa froze, face flushing. Derek stood behind her, arms crossed, voice cold. "Watch your words. We know your routine grocery mornings on Mondays, evening walks. You always sit on the porch with the paper. Don't make us remind you." I looked at him. The way he spoke made the porch feel heavy, like a shadow of violence hovered there. "Derek," I said slowly, "if you're threatening, think again. From this moment on, this is no longer just family business, it's a criminal matter," he sneered. You going to call the cops on your own daughter? No, I answered. I'll call the police if someone trespasses on my home, whoever it is. Tessa cut in, voice cracking with anger. You changed. You weren't like this before. You used to say family is everything. I still do, I said, but family doesn't mean one person pays while another keeps hurting. Derek stepped forward until his face was near the door. You really kicking us out of your life? I stared at him, calm to the point of surprise even to myself. I'm not kicking you out. I'm restoring boundaries that should have existed long ago. Tessa started to cry but still lashed out. You don't understand. I do everything for my kids. You know how much Emma and Cole need school, medicine, food. I know, I interrupted, and I used to cover all that for you for 3 years. But today I learned something new. Rescuing someone who won't learn only makes them fall deeper. She opened her mouth and couldn't speak, just sobs and ragged breaths. Marion stepped behind me, voice steady and firm. Tessa, he said what he needed to say. It's time for you to leave. Tessa turned to her mother, voice choking and bitter. You're siding with him? Marion looked at our daughter. No. I'm siding with what's right. A silence fell. The wind moved through the maples and the dry leaves scraped underfoot. Tessa turned away, tears streaming but her lips still twisted with anger. Derek gripped her hand and pulled her, but at the step he spun and said in a leaden voice, You'll regret picking a fight instead of giving in. I replied simply, Maybe. But this time I'll regret it in peace, not fear. Before he could say more, I shut the door, cutting off the threat. The wood closed like a period. Outside I heard an engine rev and tires screech as they sped off, leaving a burnt smell and a heavy hush in the house. Marion stood beside me, hand trembling. What do you think they'll do next? She asked. I watched the car disappear, around the corner. I don't know, I said, but I know what we do next. What's that? It's time the law protects us. She nodded slowly and firmly. In the late morning light I could see worry in her eyes turned into resolve. No longer fear or confusion but determination from two people who had suffered enough. I leaned my forehead against the closed door. The wood was still warm from my touch, but beyond it the heat of my daughter's and her husband's anger had dissolved into the air. Marion, I said softly, I used to think parents should forgive unconditionally. But maybe what children need to learn is consequence, and maybe today we finally start parenting. She squeezed my hand, gentle and sure. If they come back, I won't be afraid anymore. The house fell quiet again. Birds sang in the yard as if to soothe. But inside me, that door wasn't just the front door anymore, it was a boundary between past and present, between love and self-preservation. On this side were Marion and me. On the other side were two people I once called family, now strangers. I went back to the table, opened my phone, and pulled up Officer Ruiz's card. Under Local Law Enforcement, Domestic Case. I hit call. His voice came through calm and professional. Officer Ruiz speaking. Mr. Porter, I'm guessing this hasn't stopped. I looked at Marion and answered, You guessed right. We need protection. On Monday morning, a thin gray mist hung in the air. I drove to Elaine Mercer's office, an old friend of Marion's, retired from the court and now running a small private practice in the historic district. The modest sign read, Mercer and Associates, Family Law. No flair, no ads, but people said stepping in there meant choosing reason over feeling. I brought a black briefcase with everything I'd gathered in the past days, bank statements, screenshots, the police report, and handwritten notes. Marion wanted to come, but I told her to stay home. This time I needed to face it myself. Elaine greeted me with a small, practiced smile, the kind of person used to seeing families break but staying composed. She was in her 60s, short silver hair, thin-rimmed glasses. Clarence, she said when I sat down. Marion gave me a quick rundown. Now tell me everything from start to finish, but treat it as if you're telling a court, not a family. I took a deep breath and began. I told her about the argument 6 days earlier, the snake box, the furious call, and the confrontation on the porch. I described details, looks, tones, threats, and the pain of hearing my daughter say I chose money over family. I handed over every document, the reptile world charges, the transfer history showing money sent to Tessa, and notes of each interaction. Elaine listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting tidy notes in a slanted hand. When I finished, she closed her notebook and said, "You did the right thing stopping those payments. But if you want long-term protection for you and Marion, we need to turn emotion into legal rules." She took out a file and set it in front of me. "First, I recommend creating an independent education fund for the grandchildren, Olivia and Noah. Call it the Porter Family Education Trust. You can set it up, but you won't have direct access." I frowned. "No direct access?" Elaine smiled. "Right. An independent trustee, a court-approved accountant, will manage it. Funds are only released for documented education expenses, tuition, books, supplies. Tessa and Derek won't touch a single dollar." I was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "So, I can still help the kids without enabling their parents." "Exactly," Elaine said. "You protect the grandchildren while keeping your love in the right place. Your daughter might hate you, but your grandchildren won't suffer." She flipped to another file, her tone turning serious. "Next is a temporary restraining order, followed by a civil protection order. Given what you've described, the live snake, threats, coercion, that's sufficient grounds. The court can issue a protection order, keeping them at least 300 feet from your home. No contact, no calls, no texts, and no third-party harassment." I squeezed my hands together. I never imagined doing this to my own daughter. Elaine met my eyes, steady. "I've done this job for 40 years, Clarence. I've seen hundreds of parents say the same thing until something happens and they wish they'd acted sooner." I nodded, silent. A slow sorrow rose in me, but for the first time I didn't feel guilty. I knew this was no longer about parent and child, it was about the line between love and safety. Elaine pulled out a third file, my existing will from 4 years ago. "I reviewed your will. There are changes to make. I'm guessing Tessa's not on the beneficiary list anymore?" I tried a dry smile. She nodded. "Correct. I recommend revising so that your cash and real estate remain jointly titled with Marion, then pass automatically to her upon your death. Retirement accounts and insurance remain unchanged. Also, I'll add a clause. Anyone who exerts undue influence, threatens, or intentionally causes emotional harm to the testator will be disinherited." I sighed, but didn't argue. "Do it, Elaine. Leave no loopholes." She nodded and began to fill in the forms. Her pen moved slowly and deliberately. Each signed page slid toward me. I read and signed, my handwriting firm but slightly shaking at the end of each line. "Keep this safe," she said, gathering the documents. "I'll file a certified copy. And here's guidance. Save every contact, text, email, letter, any appearance by Tessa or Derek, even small incidents. The more documentation you have, the stronger your case in court." I opened my briefcase and handed her my notebook. I started already. Since the package arrived, I've logged the date, time, and what happened each day. Elaine smiled and nodded, satisfied. "Good. You're playing the board, not running around it." That line stopped me cold. I'd never thought I'd use the word bored to talk about my own daughter, but it was the truth. She went on. "Clarence, there's something you need to be ready for. People who are used to manipulating emotions to get what they won't accept new boundaries easily. When you build a wall, they'll try to climb it. When you lock the door, they'll look for the key. They'll cry, beg, or threaten sometimes, all in the same call. I looked out the window at the light reflecting off the glass table. "I know," I said, low but steady. "But I also know I'm not backing down this time." Elaine gave a small smile, gathered the papers, then stood. "I'll file everything today. You'll receive a copy of the temporary order within 48 hours. Stay calm, follow the process, and don't handle anything on your own. Let the law do its part." I shook her hand, the firm grip of two people who understand that sometimes you need paperwork to protect what the heart can't hold anymore. When I stepped out of the office, the wind carried a hint of early rain. I paused on the sidewalk, opened my bag, and looked at the packet secured in a plastic cover. On it, bold letters read, "Restraining Order and Trust Foundation." Every page inside felt like a latch finally set in place, not to bind but to protect. I knew life wouldn't be as quiet as before. But for the first time in years, I wouldn't be living in fear. I glanced back at the red brick building and gave a faint smile. Elaine was right, people who manipulate won't accept boundaries easily. But I was ready for whatever came next. Because this time, I wasn't playing to win, I was playing to keep my peace. 2 days after meeting Elaine, my phone rang at exactly 8 a.m. Her name lit up the screen. I was about to answer when Marion called from the kitchen. "Is that Mrs. Mercer? I hope it's good news." I smiled. "I hope so too." Elaine's voice came through clear, crisp, and professional as always. "Clarence, calling with an update. The temporary restraining order was approved and served this morning. County police confirm both Tessa and Derek have been notified. Also, the new will is notarized and on file. From this point forward, any contact, appearance, or pressure from them counts as a legal violation." I was quiet for a few seconds. Not from surprise, but because something heavy and odd rose in me, a feeling that was part relief, part sadness, like finally closing a door that's been stuck for too long. "Thank you, Elaine," I said softly. "You don't know what this means to us." "I do, Clarence," she said. "But remember, this isn't an ending. It's the beginning of peace that's protected by law. You and Marion can live calmly now, and if they cross the line, call me or the police right away. Do not confront them yourself." "I understand," I said. "This time I won't let emotions run the show." We exchanged a few more words and I hung up. Morning light filled the kitchen, glinting off the steaming coffee cup. Marion looked at me, no questions, but I knew she understood. I sat down and said quietly, clearly, "It's official. The order, the will, and the education fund for Olivia and Noah done. They can't do anything now." Marion smiled, soft like an exhale. She rested a hand on my shoulder. "So we can finally live in peace." For the first time in months, the constant tightness in my chest was gone. No fear of late-night calls, no sudden pounding at the door, no demanding texts. The house returned to its natural state, quiet, but the kind of quiet that's peaceful, not the calm before a storm. That evening we had dinner like usual. No big topics. No, "Do you think Tessa will call?" or "What if she apologizes?" Just two older people eating a simple meal, grilled meat, salad, and a small glass of wine. Midway through, Marion said softly, "Do you remember the first family picture she drew? 3 of us holding hands. She put herself between us, with bright orange hair like the sun." I nodded, a quick smile. "She said she wanted to be an artist. It's been 30 years. I still have the original in the wooden box under the stairs." "Thinking about it now," Marion whispered, "it's hard to believe that drawing belonged to the child who today had to be served papers by the police." I looked at her and shook my head slightly. "She's still that child, Marion, just lost for too long. I still hope one day she finds her way back, but if that day never comes, I won't lose myself again." After dinner, we cleaned up together. No one said the name Tessa. When the last light slipped behind the maples, I turned off the lights, leaving only the small lamp in the living room. The warm glow threw our shadows on the wall, two older, slightly stooped figures but peaceful. Looking at my shadow, I realized it looked lighter than ever. Not because I was younger, but because I'd stopped carrying what wasn't mine: guilt, the weight of misplaced love, and the fear of being misunderstood. Marion settled on the sofa with a thin blanket. I put a hand on her shoulder. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" She smiled gently. "Long, but worth it. Because in the end, you're still here, I'm still here, and this house, it's still ours." I nodded, looking around. Every corner held old memories, laughter, tears, someone knocking to ask for money, and bright mornings full of hope. But tonight, those sounds were far away. When the clock hit 10 o'clock, I turned off the living room lamp. Darkness faded in, leaving only moonlight at the window, soft and calm. "Marion," whispered, "it's been a long time since we slept through the night." "Maybe tonight will be different," I said, pulling the curtain closed. And it was. We slept straight through. No dreams, no jolting awake at strange sounds. For others that might be normal, for us, it was a gift. In the morning, I woke to the first light slipping through the curtains. Sparrows were singing in the yard, and the smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, warm, real, not mixed with worry. I came downstairs to Marion, pouring coffee into cups. She turned and smiled. "Sleep well?" "Better than the last 10 years, I said, voice light as mist. We sat together without talking, just listening to the morning, the birds, the wind in the leaves, the slow tick of the clock. I looked at the steaming coffee and thought of Olivia and Noah, our grandkids whose futures were now secured, but not through their parents' hands. Elaine said the fund would pay tuition each term automatically, without Tessa's permission or involvement. A small part of me eased, knowing the cycle would stop with their generation. I set the cup down and looked out at the new green on the lawn. No more pounding doorbells, no more threats, just peace, the real kind. I understood. Peace doesn't mean forgetting someone, it means they no longer control your emotions. I took a deep breath and looked at Marion. "You know," I said slowly, "I think I made the right choice. Not choosing between my child and money, but choosing to be a father with boundaries, not a victim of my own love." She squeezed my hand and smiled a smile that needed no words. I held her hand, looking into the pale morning light. The birds kept singing, the coffee smelled rich, and in that moment I knew for certain I'd made the right choice. The days that followed were so quiet they felt almost unfamiliar. No more emergency calls at midnight, no more complaining texts, no more polite demands dressed up as just a little help. The house truly returned to a retiree's rhythm, slow, tidy, orderly, and peaceful. In the mornings I read the paper and put on old Miles Davis records while Marion watered the porch plants. The steady hiss of the watering can, mixed with the bird song, made it feel like the world itself was breathing softer. It had been a long time since I actually heard what quiet sounds like. In the afternoons we walked the neighborhood, maple-lined streets just starting to turn. Marion said it was the first time in years she could walk without checking her phone. "Every time it rang," she said with a small laugh, "my heart jumped, afraid something happened." I nodded. "Me too. We've been living like storm lookouts in our own home." She squeezed my hand, smile softening. "Do you think there's a way to keep love and still keep boundaries?" I thought a minute. "Yes, but it starts by understanding love doesn't mean enduring everything. Boundaries don't kill love, they protect it from becoming a burden." Marion gave me a look that settled. "Sounds like you're talking to yourself." I smiled. "I am. I used to think love meant giving without conditions. Turns out when there are no conditions, people forget the value of what's given." We did a few more loops and headed home. Evening light laid a thin layer of gold over the porch, warm as the dust of old memories. I sat on the bench and opened the small notebook I'd carried through this whole process. I organized everything: evidence, emails, the police report, screenshots, and Elaine's documents into a separate drive, neatly labeled folders, numbered clearly. I updated the home cameras, new passwords, automatic cloud backups, emergency alerts tested. Each step felt like turning the key on a door to the past. Not to erase it, but to make sure it never opened the wrong way again. When I finished, I printed a blank page and wrote a letter to myself. At the top, I wrote, "To Clarence, the man who once didn't know boundaries." Slowly, one line at a time. Don't forget today's lesson. People can love so much they forget themselves, but if they never stop, that love becomes a shackle. Remember, helping doesn't mean carrying. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. And sometimes the deepest love is the courage to say, enough. If someday you soften again, read this page. I folded the letter and slid it into the bottom drawer where I keep the most personal things. My father's watch, the first movie ticket with Marion, and Tessa's childhood family drawing. 3 keepsakes, 3 generations, 3 phases of love now resting without clashing. I turned to Marion. "I'll send a backup of everything to Elaine tomorrow. Better safe than sorry." "You're right," she said. "I want us to lock every corner where feelings might sneak in." I smiled, knowing she understood what I meant without boundaries. Love turns into a weapon. That night, while checking the news, I came across a notice about scholarships for kids with independent education funds. Olivia and Noah's names were on the school's preliminary registration list. I pictured them, Olivia with her short blonde hair and sketchbook, Noah with his model airplanes. Now their futures were secure tuition, books, even counseling if needed, all through a fund outside their parents' control. Tessa might be angry with me, but at least the innocent wouldn't pay for adult mistakes. I turned off the screen and sat in the dim glow of the desk lamp. A simple truth hit me. For years I hadn't been living. I'd been putting out fires for someone else. Without boundaries, my love made me an endless supply of money, forgiveness, and patience. Now that I'd learned to love with limits, I finally felt alive again. Helping no longer meant enabling. Caring was no longer weakness. I helped with the law, with order, with clarity, and with saying no when needed. I pulled up Officer Ruiz's number. His calm, professional voice came right away. "Hello, Mr. Porter. Everything okay?" "Better than I expected," I said, warmth in my voice. "I just wanted to say thank you. You and your team handled everything so professionally. Because of you, my wife and I can finally rest." He chuckled. "Hearing that is enough. We're just doing our job." "I know. But to me, it's no small thing." I made one more call to Mike Halper from Animal Control. He recognized my voice immediately and laughed. "Oh, Mr. Porter, that corn snake's doing great at the center. I think it's got a bond with you." I laughed. "I just hope it's happier than I was that morning." We said goodbye and I hung up, feeling unexpectedly warm. Late that night I brewed 2 cups of tea and brought them to the porch. Marion was reading but closed her book when she saw me and scooted over. I sat, handed her a cup. "I called Ruiz and Mike," I said. "Told them if anything seems off, reach out to us. But remember, if anyone violates the order, don't hesitate, call 911. Marion looked at me, eyes bright in the dark. "You sound like you're still worried." "I'm not worried," I said. "Just cautious. Peace doesn't come from forgetting, it comes from knowing what you'll do if trouble returns." She nodded and squeezed my hand, small, soft, but warm and sure. Moonlight washed across the porch and over our faces. I heard wind move over the roof, carrying the smell of grass and wildflowers, the scent of a calm night after a storm. I looked up and spoke like a quiet prayer. "Thank you for giving me a chance to set things right before it was too late." Marion rested her head on my shoulder without a word. Her hand stayed clasped with mine, a reminder. We finally stepped out of the storm together. Morning light poured into the kitchen like thin honey, bathing everything in gold. The smell of fresh coffee filled the house, mixed with the scent of basil as Marion watered the pots on the porch. Droplets sparkled on the leaves, catching the first sunlight I'd forgotten because I'd spent so long putting out nameless fires. I stood at the window with a hot mug in my hand and felt a deep, quiet stillness. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up feeling like I owed anyone an explanation, a check, or a chance at redemption. No more guilt-laced texts or dread of the phone. It was just me, whole and at peace. Marion turned, her eyes bright in the morning sun. "What's making you smile?" "I'm thinking," I said softly, "that I finally stopped living to put out other people's fires." She smiled and came inside, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sounds like you paid off an old debt." I nodded. "Not a money debt, an overdue debt to toxic requests. The kind that makes you forget you're allowed to have peace." On the table by the window lay the packet, the new will, the restraining order, and the education fund for Olivia and Noah. I call them the protection trio for old age. They don't just protect assets, they protect my mind from the old loop: feel guilty, forgive, get hurt again. I opened the notebook that's been with me this whole way and flipped to the last page. The paper was slightly yellowed, the corners worn, but the ink was dark. I wrote my closing line, slow and firm. Setting boundaries is how you love yourself and how you love your children the right way. I knew I wasn't writing to remind Tessa. I was writing to myself, the man who once thought unconditional love was the highest virtue, until he learned love without limits can cut both ways. I looked out at the porch. Marion was gathering the pots, a small smile on her face that quieted my heart. A light breeze moved the basil leaves, making a soft sound like the breath of peace. If one day Tessa takes responsibility for her life, this door will open again. But not with my wallet, not with my father's guilt, only with real growth. I'm not angry with Tessa. Anger just weighs the heart down. But I've stopped living with the belief that I can save everyone. Everyone has to learn their own lesson, and mine was this: letting go is also a form of love. I closed the notebook with a small click that sounded like a seal in the quiet room. I breathed in the cool air drifting through the window. Outside, early light touched the red maples, each leaf tilting in the breeze. Nature was calm, and so was I. Marion poured more coffee and sat across from me. She said softly, "You know, Clarence, some storms pass not to destroy but to show us we're still standing." I smiled. "And to remind us we didn't let go of each other." She reached out and I took her hand. Two old, calloused hands, but warmer and steadier than ever. In that moment I knew we'd finished the long road through the storm, and now it was time to live the days we had left in the simplest way: peaceful, free, and with boundaries. If you're still here, I truly thank you. Not because you clicked a video, but because you stayed to hear an old father learn how to say enough. Maybe you've also given too much, been hurt by someone you love. I understand. Peace doesn't come from loving more, it comes from knowing when to stop. I share this not to complain, but to remind you, we can start over at any age. How about you? Where are you watching from? And what boundary has helped you keep your peace? Share in the comments. Your story might help someone be stronger today. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so we can meet again on the next journey.